Hi Susan. It's
Hi, Anna.
Hi. It's
So
really
nice to
lovely to
see
see
you.
you. I know it's really great to see you too. I really appreciate you doing this for us. As you know, as
Oh,
I said, that it's going on to the prison TVs and also the people that are out of prison. And so most people who are going to be watching this don't know you, and
okay.
they might have heard about you from what I've talked about you in prison. But I'd love you to just introduce yourself. You can say anything; it doesn't matter, and then and say a little bit about what you do and how we met and what you do in the world.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm really, really excited to be here, and I wish I could see who I was talking to, and really genuinely meet you face to face, but that's obviously not possible for many reasons right now. COVID being one of them. My name's Susan, and I live in London, and I do something very similar to what Anna does, and I work in the prison system in England, and that's one of the jobs I do. But so I've been doing that for about 5 years now, and in fact, I met Anna when she was training to do what we do, and also we worked together in the prisons for the first year. It was about a year, wasn't it, Anna?
Yeah, about you.
Yeah. And it was, yeah, wonderful working with Anna, and we were really sad when she left to go to Portland, but we're so proud of everything that she's done out there, and what she's achieved. It's amazing. She's a beacon of light, as you probably all know. um, and so I've been working mainly in men's prisons for the last 5 years. It's been not that easy for us to get into women's prisons, but I did manage to do one program in a women's prison, and absolutely loved it. So it's definitely a community I'd love to work with more. What else can I say? What else can I tell you about that, Anna?
What do you? Let's see. What do you enjoy? So when you first started working in prison, because it's not something that everyone does, as you know. And I'm curious what you saw when you were there that had you wanted to continue and really love the work that we do.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't sort of, I didn't have like a deep desire to work with this population like some people do. It just was something I was asked to do, and I found myself raising my hand when the person I worked with, she's called Jacqueline, asked if she needed some help, and I found myself raising my hand, and it was almost like I surprised myself. And then I went in, I didn't know what to expect. I'd never been in a prison before. I don't think I even probably knew anyone who'd been to prison. So I didn't have any ideas about it. And I went in and we started working in there. And I think at first I felt, very much initially, I felt frightened. I was a bit uncertain, unsure. I didn't know what would happen in groups. I sort of had imaginations about how it would be. And what happened, which was, I don't know what I was expecting, but what happened is, as we started to share this understanding, which I know a lot of you have had Anna share with you, is that those groups, some of the most profound loving experiences I've had working with people have absolutely been in prison, and that was a surprise. I didn't, and especially because when you start groups, people don't really know what you're talking about. They come with a lot of what we call content, where they're very understandably talking about the system and the prison officers and what's not working and how difficult it is. And they come in and it's quite noisy. There's a lot of talk like that. And as they start to understand what we're talking about, everybody kind of starts to quieten down. And I mean, not just externally, but their minds just start to quieten down. So sometimes for the first time forever, those people start to feel a little bit of peace inside. As their minds kind of quieten down, the group energy really starts to change. and we start sharing different things to our kind of day-to-day problems. Start sharing things like hopes and dreams, and start sharing things like feeling sympathy or empathy or connection to one another. And you just kind of, me, myself, and the guy start dropping into a place where we all kind of feel the oneness and feel connected and really kind of support each other and listen to each other. And I never ever don't come out of prison doing a group and don't feel completely loved up, completely privileged to be able to do this work, and blown away by the things that I hear and the depth that those groups go to. So why wouldn't I keep coming back? I mean, that is something that most people don't experience in their lifetimes, let alone as their job. And what I notice is, as you start working with people and as their minds start to get a little bit more spacious, what we call like their level of consciousness starts to change, and what they see as possible for themselves start to change. And they start seeing things that they didn't know were possible for them. Because when their minds are clearer, we start to feel our okayness, and we start to get in touch with, there's, that when you look out from that place, there looks like there's hope, there's possibility. You start getting new ideas, creative ideas, things that had never occurred to people. So people start to feel better and see that there's so many more things that are possible than they ever thought were possible when they were caught in that really unhelpful thinking. And I see that in my life. When I'm caught up, things don't look good, they don't look possible. And then when I start to release that, I start getting new and fresh ideas about what's possible. And we've worked with a lot of people who have now left the prison system, and they're living fantastic, happy lives. It's not saying it's easy, because lots of things are challenging for people when they come out of prison. But they're not being held back anymore. And their relationships with their family and their children have completely changed. And when things aren't going well, instead of looking to something out there to blame, they just think, oh God, I'm just a bit caught up. And it will look different when I'm not. Everything passes. And if knowing this understanding, that everything passes. And that is such a blessing to know that, because you don't get so frightened when you're caught up that you're in this depression and you'll never get out of it. Things move, and if we leave them alone, they move kind of quick. So the other morning I woke up, this hasn't happened to me for a long time. I do wake up sometimes caught up or a bit busy in the head or whatever, but I actually woke up the other morning and I just felt really kind of awful, and it felt like I used to feel all the time, really, really, really heady. And in that place, I genuinely thought, this isn't going to pass. Because that's normal in that place. That's the outlook from that place. And of course, in an hour, it moved and I was fine. But it felt so real that it wasn't going to pass. And I felt frightened of my experience in that moment, because I forgot the way it works. And it was horrible. It's the first time that had happened to me for a really long time, that I got stuck somewhere. Well, I felt like I was stuck. I didn't actually get stuck. Once I left it alone, it kind of did its own thing. I reset.
So I have a question, because there are a lot of people who probably listen to this who don't really know what we do. But I think sometimes it's helpful to talk about that from your personal experience. So you've just said a little bit about, kind of where you always used to spend a lot of time in a kind of a stuck kind of headspace or agitated or whatever, how you said it. But when you first came across you started to understand your own mind and how it works, like what was the thing that changed for you, that realized like, oh my God, this is a direction I want to go in? Or what was your first insight, or you know what I mean? Like, where did this start for you?
So, you know, I just spent all of every day thinking about things that had happened, things that may happen, and I just wasn't in the moment. And I'd been on trainings, I'd been on courses where people said, the moment is the thing that counts, but I didn't even know how to get to the moment, because I was so interested in everything that I was thinking. And by interested, I'm not saying it was pleasant, it was mostly unpleasant, but I didn't know you didn't have to think everything that came into your head. So a lot of times I was thinking very insecure thoughts, or that I wasn't good enough, or that I couldn't do things. And every time they came into my head, I grabbed them and made them the reason why I couldn't go out and do something. Well, I can't do it. I believed them. I believed every insecure thought that came into my head. And it stopped me very much moving forward in my life. And I was also really interested in every thought about what was wrong with me. I used to have a list of what was wrong with me. And every time those thoughts came through, I was really, really interested in those. And by interested, I don't mean like, oh, just examining them. I mean, I felt like crap. Every time those thoughts came through, I would grab hold of them and think I'm a useless or stupid or an idiot. And of course, everything you think, you feel, which I didn't know it worked like that. But because I'm thinking it, I'm feeling it. It's as simple as that. And if I wasn't interested in the thought and it moved, I wouldn't feel it until I thought it again. I was constantly feeling like crap. But just because I didn't understand the way the system worked, I didn't understand anything about thought. I thought you have to think what you thought. I thought you had to think everything that came in your head. So that was where I was getting myself in a muddle. And my first insight was quite a big one. And it was suddenly seeing that I was creating my suffering because of the way I was engaging with all my thoughts. So when I started to think about, for example, an ex-boyfriend that had really mistreated me, and I was starting to cry in the present moment, I thought it was because of that boy and the way he treated me. And I started to see that my pain was coming from the thinking, not the boy. Because the boy I hadn't seen for 5 years, right? So if I was constantly grabbing things from the past, bringing them to the now, and examining them, I was going to be feeling sad, but it had nothing to do with a person. It had to do that I was just the way I was using my thinking. And when I started to see that, it shocked me. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that all of my pain wasn't coming from these people that had mistreated me in the past, that it was coming from my thinking about those people that I was bringing into the present and grabbing hold of. So once I started to see that, it was like the thoughts keep coming, but I just kind of let them come and go. I wouldn't grab them and make them mean something. I wouldn't add extra thinking to them. So they kind of come in and go out, come in and go out. So I started to get times in the day where I just had a little bit more space, where I wasn't thinking all the time about bad things that had happened to me in the past, or what might happen to me in the future, or what I might not get in the future. That was often what I wouldn't get. I'd never have a good relationship. I thought I'd never have this. So I was always in the past or the future with this thinking. So I started to be less interested in it when it came in. And because thought's designed to move, it would come in and go out, come in and go out. And then I would occasionally have spaces where my mind was just freer. And I'd feel okay in those times. I wouldn't feel the loser that I felt when I attached to all my thinking. And it's because, and that the second thing I just didn't know about was that when we're not running a bunch of unhelpful thinking, we are resting in everything we could ever want and everything we've ever been looking for. It's already in us. We already are everything we want. We just keep misusing our mind and feeling that thinking and not feeling okay. But when we're not interested in it and it just moves on, or even if we get interested in it, but we're not worried about that, we can go back to okay whenever we want. Is that helpful?
I love that. I love the way you talk about it. That was so cool. I just got kind of really interested in just yeah. I just love that. I love that. Thank you. I don't know if you can
Oh,
hear that
good.
those texts
Ping
beeping.
ping.
And I don't know how to turn them off. So I apologize to everybody that there's a ping ping in the background. Sometimes they don't come up, and now just like people having a conversation on I don't know what's going on. Anyway,
Well, so, but that's a great example, because like in the old days, if I had the ping ping and I was doing something, I'd be so interested in the ping ping, I wouldn't be able to tell you what I want to tell you. And now I'm like, yeah, whatever, ping ping away. It's like, I can let it go. We can let anything go.
that's good. I love that. And so, we're as you know, obviously, we're all sitting here in lockdown, and we can't get out. And I'm just curious: is there anything that you've, anything fresh or anything that you've noticed from sort of having this space and having this time right now of what's going on with you that you've seen that's been helpful or
Well, I'll
interesting?
tell you something that I've seen so many things that are interesting, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But one thing I thought was sweet that my dad said. My dad's 98, and he said, I asked him how he was doing, and he said, I'm doing better than your mother. And I said, oh, that's good, I think. I don't know. And he said, because she's constantly waiting for this to end, and I'm just happy where I am.
Hmm,
I thought, oh, that's wise, Dad.
that's good. I like
That's
that.
wise.
Yeah, it is.
And so knowing this has been my savior, because I know for a lot of people, they have a lot of anxiety and worry about the future, and that I sympathize. But knowing this has helped me very much just stay in the moment, because the way I understand the mind works now is that when we get into a lot of worry and anxiety about something in the future, our mind kind of becomes less helpful to us. It contracts. It's like it, I was talking about how when I got spacious, I got new thinking, new ideas. It's like when we get into a lot of anxiety and worry, those new ideas, they're trying to come up, but they can't because there's no space. And so when we feel very contracted and anxious and worried, it is useful to kind of be less interested in that, because it's not like you're not dealing with things about the future, but you'll just get some fresh ideas that you won't be able to see when you're very caught up in your anxious and worried thinking. It's like when we're caught up like this, we only see a certain bit of the picture, but when we're not interested in that thinking, we will actually start to see more. And seeing more and getting fresh ideas is what we need if we're going to come out of this and find ways to kind of get on. So that's been really helpful for me. It's like when I feel very contracted, I know I'm not using my mind in a helpful way, and that whenever I get fearful and contracted, it's always going to look hopeless from there. So helpful to know that. It's like that's what happens when we get fearful and anxious. The view looks crap. And when our minds get a bit more rested, the world's the same, but the views change. We see more's possible. So that's been incredibly helpful for me. And it's really helped me stay in the moment and really enjoy nature in a way that I feel like I've never really enjoyed before in the same way. It's just the garden, the flowers, the birds. I mean, I'm lucky to see these things, and I'm still badly saying them actually now, but, really just being very, very conscious of the quietness and being in the moment. And sometimes I find myself getting very speedy in my head again about what I should be doing, and what, this is lockdown and I should be doing this job and that job and the other job. And like, who's making that list? It's like, it's good to sometimes see, oh, that's me doing that to me. Is that helpful? Does that get me going quicker? Do I want to do those things? It's like, sometimes it's like someone else is giving me the to-do list. No, it's me doing that. I can do what I do want to do or not want to do, whatever makes sense to me. And sometimes it's kind of quite good to notice that you kind of get in some gear when I should do this and I should do that. And things don't go so well from there as when you're just sort of, oh, I'm just going to write this now, or I'm just going to do that now. It feels it's coming from a different place. So that's a good reminder for me.
Yeah.
But I think if I didn't know this, my biggest thing would be keeping on jumping to the future and trying to work it out from here, how it was going to look. And it's all made up because none of us know. None of us know how it's going to look. None of us know how it's going to be. But if when we get to that point, we will have some wisdom on how to deal with that when it comes. And I've started to see that happen over and more and more and more and more. So I trust it will happen now. In the beginning, I didn't really trust that would happen. But now I see that if I don't get too caught up in thinking that I will be shown something that's useful.
That's cool. And you'd know, we'd had a little chat before we were doing this, and you were saying that you've been really kind of enjoying living life, the life that you want, you know, during lockdown, and you were a little like wondering what's going to happen when it's finished. And I was just curious what you meant by that. Like, can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, because there's certain choices that I've made since I've been in lockdown. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, I love my friends and I love my family and I love my work, but I'm also enjoying not doing those things and not seeing people. I mean, and I realize that quite a lot of the things I do from a should, or like, I haven't seen that person for ages, I should see them. And it may be nice to see them, it may not be nice to see them, but I'm kind of, lockdown has given me some protection in a way to just hang out here and do what feels right without the pressure of the outside world. Now, the pressure of the outside world is my thinking about pressure about the outside world. And I'm concerned that when lockdown comes off, I will apply that pressure again and start to do things or see people or go towards work that may, kinds of work that I may feel like it's time to move on from. I feel like this gives me a buffer, but it's also me doing that to me. If lockdown lifts and I feel like I've got to go and see everybody I know and go and check them out and make sure they're, it's like there's a lot of things I do from a should that I'm concerned about or interested in seeing what will happen when lockdown lifts.
Yeah. And I think I can imagine, like, some people could be listening to this and going, but there is pressure, because you were saying that the pressure from the outside world, and you realize that pressure's coming from you. But what about like pressure that feels really real? Like, when you say that pressure's coming from your thinking, but I'm sure there's some people watching this and that could think, well, what about the pressure? I've got, there's definitely pressure coming from the outside. Like, what does that look like to you?
Okay, so I'll give you an example. Like, so many things look like they're coming from the outside. Like, do you remember when I said when I first worked with guys in prison, and they would talk a lot about the prison officers, for example, or the situation of being in prison, and it looked a certain way. It looked one way. It looked like, for example, maybe some people might say the officers didn't care about them or never answered their questions, or that they may have looked at it like that. When they started to understand that and their mind got a bit freer, they would say something like, oh, I see he's just busy, or I see he's just doing his job. I'm talking about the prison officer. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that when we attribute something that's going on, the way we're feeling, to something on the outside, we will only see one version of it. When we start to see that there's always more ways to see things, and if we're interested in seeing more ways, and I'm always interested because it's always helpful for me to see more ways, I start to feel better. I don't feel so tight or angry or upset or worried or anxious. And I will start to see more perspectives. It's like from going, sometimes we say that in groups, that it's like going from facing a corner to realizing there's a whole room if you turn around. So if we're feeling that something's pressurizing us from the outside, it means we're looking at it in the same way every time we think about it. So say we were worried about whether we get a job when we came out of prison. If every time that's looking hopeless, or what you're thinking about it in the same way every time, if you want to see more about that, be less interested in your usual thinking about it, and then fresh thinking will come that will show you more about that that's useful for you. Does that answer?
It does. That's great.
Okay.
I love it. So we've got a little lesson here. It's really good. Before we finish, I was just, I was thinking about people that that you work with, and you were talking about the guys that get out and they get custody of their kids back, and they get good jobs and stuff. Is there a particular story of a particular person that you can think of just off the top of your head? And there may not be, because when I get asked this question, all sorts of
oh my god I'm going to tell you a few. So we've got can I use I'll call him something else maybe, but I could just use first name.
First name's good. No one's gonna know who anyone
is. We've got David. I think you knew David, right?
Yeah.
David, he'd been in prison for killing somebody, and he was one of the worst prisoners they had in there. He was a really, really tall, big guy, kind of guy you think you don't want to meet him down a dark alley. And he, when he started to understand this, he became we got what's called a red band, which means you get some freedoms in prison, and he got a job, and he was one of the most trusted prisoners. He went from being one of the worst prisoners to one of the most trusted prisoners. He's come out. He managed to get a job in a pub that was owned by his uncle, so that he got some employment. But it's not like it's easy. It's not easy to find employment. I'm not saying it is. He did some work on a building site, but he is loved up with this lady and her kids, and he's living in bliss in a relationship. He's never been able to even be faithful in the past, and he's absolutely loved up with this lady, and they're really, really happy. I imagine they will probably get engaged and get married. But so he's one. Then there's another one, lovely guy, Derek. Whole history of drugs and gangs, and in and out of prison all his life. So had 3 kids in the moments that he was out of prison, but then gone back in and not been able to be there for his kids in the way that he obviously would like to have been. I had this long-term partner, came out, and they're now all in lockdown together, for goodness sakes, gone from one extreme to the other. And he's had managed to find sort of painting work on a day-to-day basis, but his relationship with this partner who's been with forever, he can't believe where it's at. It's not, they get to enjoy each other. That's really new for them. And he's getting to be the father he wanted to be and be there for his kids. And he notices if he gets irritable or angry or impatient, that hasn't got anything to do with his kids. That's just human, and that's just the way he's using his mind. And he can come out of that any moment. He didn't know any of that, so it was always a big mess and difficult. I can tell you more.
I know.
Do you know what I mean?
I know. I totally know what you mean, and I love that. There's so many, and I know that there's so many. We could sit here all day, and that's it's so hopeful, and I just love hearing some of the stories, especially when I've known them when they were, and how well they're doing and stuff. So it's
and even if people aren't doing so well, or if they went back in, then they're not, the guys we're working with aren't, but if they did, it's like they wouldn't go back in the same. They know something new now about how the mind works.
It's true. Yeah, that's so cool. Well, it's been so fun, and I could keep asking you questions, but I'm also know that my zip drives are only a certain size, and so we can't keep going. But thank you, and I so miss working with you in prison, and I